All right, welcome back. So it's time to work on the last two pieces, the edit and delete, making good progress. So let's go ahead and get started and just kind of see where we're at. So the first thing is let's go ahead and hit our edit buttons. So if we make sure our page is up to date here, if we hit edit, it shows them, and that works just fine. If you click on edit though, right here, there's already something that's wrong. And the thing that's wrong is that the title of this says add a movie quote and it says add quote. Let's go look to see kind of what's going on with that. So here's where you clicked on that little green button. So it says edit movie quote, click. And it should have set the title. I mean, that actually looks right. Admittedly, the button, it doesn't look right, so we're going to need to fix the button. And what the button is the selector has changed on it. So no longer is it a type submit. So we can fix that, that's easy. It's now just the insert quote button. There are problems as well. So it didn't display anything, like it didn't display what the quote was or what the movie was or anything like that. Some of this stuff we just don't need, right? So these two lines about the entity key, just delete those. They just doesn't work that way anymore. Getting the quote and getting the movie, we're still going to do those, but we're going to implement them so different that we're actually just going to go ahead and delete that line. And then these two things on the page, these have changed as well. So these now are the quote input and the movie input. So I'm going to go ahead and fix those. So that's going to be my quote input and then my movie input. So great, I fixed those things, but it's not going to help any because the title was wrong too, right? So the title didn't get fixed, the button didn't get fixed. These two things haven't. What's wrong? And what's wrong is a race condition. So when the page loads, none of those buttons exist, right? So none of them exist. Those buttons don't exist until you do a query to the back end, you clone that thing, and it adds them to the page. And the problem is that this code, this jQuery code, it runs one time when you tell it to run, right? And so that's why we didn't run it until the document was ready, but we ran it, and it missed, right? So it ran before those things were there. So we need a solution to this problem. It turns out that this is one of the nice things about using popular frameworks. Everybody needs this fix, right? This is a very common problem. And so it needs some resolution. And jQuery has a way to do it. And the way you do it is you put a listener on a parent that does exist. So the parent that does exist is the T-body in this case. So we say, hey, T-body, whenever you get a click, and we only care about clicks to edit movie quotes for this one, then what I want you to do is I want you to call a function for me. And the really nice thing about this code is this line right here, it can just be used instead of that line right there. So we say T-body, which is an element that does exist when this runs, listen for clicks, and then filter those clicks for just the ones that are on edit movie quote elements that are inside of you, and then call this function. And the nice thing is that everything works just like it did before from then on. So this is just another syntax to dynamically add listeners, which is really handy that it exists, right? Frameworks, love them and hate them. So now I click on edit, and it says edit this movie quote. It says update this quote. These two things still don't exist yet, but that's because we haven't implemented that yet. At least the things we have implemented work, and then the things we just haven't done yet, we got to go do now. Cool, so learned a lot of little new jQuery tricks there. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to actually get data. So how do we get data? So we've got the data in our JavaScript. They clicked on a button, and now we need to take that data and show it in the modal, right? A lot of different ways we could control our data. One way we could do it is on each of those buttons, we could just like put the ID of the movie quote or the entity key. Then when it's clicked, we could say, hey, this is the entity key that was clicked. We could go look up from a map, like the data for that entity key. We're going to keep it a little simpler than that. And what we're going to do is go find your new MovieQuote row. We're going to use a nice trick. So this trick is called data. And what this trick lets you do is it lets you use the data attribute, which is a relatively new thing to HTML. It's really similar. It's actually the same as what Bootstrap does, right? So they add their own like data hyphen toggle and data hyphen target. You can do your own things too, and you can actually put your own data on there too. So I'm going to say quote.data quote add, and that's going to actually stick that data onto the HTML. And the data is nice because it doesn't affect display or rendering or anything like that. It's just on there for later reference. The one thing you do have to be careful about though is this is on the table row, right? So if we just kind of go look at our HTML, so this data is going to be on this item. So you're going to click on this button, and we're going to want to pull the data from the TR that's kind of like the parent. All right, so the data is on there. It's just waiting for us to pull it off at the appropriate time. So what we want to do is right here, we want to pull off this data. So let's make a variable. We'll call it the MovieQuote row. I think I did this slightly different in the slides, but this is the MovieQuote row. And what we're going to do here is we're going to say $ this. So that makes a jQuery object out of the button, right? And then we're going to say parents. Parents is a method which lets you like get all of your parents in the DOM tree. And we're going to say, hey, go looking for the parent that has the MovieQuote class. And so that's why we added this class on here so we could easily find it. Could have also just used TR, but I kind of liked adding the class, so I added the class on there. So that's going to give us the one parent that matches those criteria. And then what we're going to do is we're going to say MovieQuote. So this is kind of like the data is going to be the MovieQuote row dot data. And then we're just going to test to make sure that it works. You know what? Let's just shoot the moon. Instead of doing a console logs, we're just going to say MovieQuote.quote, and then we'll say MovieQuote.movie. And if it works, we should see those things show up on the page. So let's go try it out. So reload. So now it's going to try to get the data from the row, and it's going to try to make them show up on the dialog. So you're going to know if it worked or not real fast, because if those two inputs are empty, then things went badly. So I click on edit, mine worked, right? So you can see that it filled this data in here, which is great. Now functionality wise, we haven't really done much. If I hit update quote, it's going to do another ad, right? So I hit update quote, and sure enough, it just did another ad. Not what I wanted, right? Not my plan. I want to actually update it. So in order to actually update it, what needs to happen is we need to, when we send it up, we need to send the entity key with it, right? So we need to save off that entity key. So right here, we know the entity key because we've got the data. Problem is we need to still know it when they hit insert, right? So we just need to save it off as a variable. Just to kind of make it the same as the notes, I'm just going to go ahead and copy it from my notes. I called it selected entity key in my notes. Great. So selected entity key. Whenever you use a variable like that, you should go ahead and define it to be null to begin with. So I'm just going to go ahead and find. I'll put it down below because that's where I've been adding my stuff, right? So selected entity key is null by default. And then if I just go find where I was typing, and then up here it's going to be my MovieQuote dot entity key. And the entity key exists because we defined it in the message field schema, which was part of our data store model, and so that's why it exists. So when they click that edit button, I'm going to save off that they have a selected entity key. Now you do have to be a little careful. And the thing you have to be careful about is if they hit the add button, so the add button clears those two fields off, the add button should also clear off the selected entity key as well, right? So it just kind of clears that off. Cool, so that's great. We've saved off the selected entity key, super. So what? You've got to use it for it to be useful. So let's go use it. So let's find where we do this post. So it's the insert quote button. I got too many commented out things here. I'm going to delete some of my commented out things just so I can see again. Data to send is the things that went up to the server. And what we really need to do is we need to also send an entity key. And what the nice thing is that if we defined it as null, or we defined it to be something, the nice thing about that is you can always send it up. It's just that sometimes it'll be null, right? So on an add, you'll still send it up, but you'll send it up as null, and that works out just fine. So I kind of like that. You don't even have to make any if statements. Like, you don't have to say if it exists. You just always send it up. It's just that it might be null. Cool. So now we're going to really do edits, which I love. So let's go ahead and refresh this. Find yourself a nice unique quote. Here I've got this M and Q thing. Find yourself a nice unique quote and edit it. So I'm going to edit this MQ and just make a slight modification to it. So I'm just going to say like MMM. So update quote. So cool. So here it is, QMMM. You don't have to look far to see the problem though. And the problem is that the Q and the M is still here. Why is it still there? If you refresh the page, so you click refresh, you can see that it is gone. So here's what happened. It worked. It sent it to the back end. It really did an edit. The problem is that with Ajax, you're responsible for the page, and it just never got removed from the DOM. Fine, let's go remove it from the DOM. Ugh. So what we've got to do is, it's almost the exact same trick as before. So we had this selected entity key thing. And so what we're going to do is we're going to have a row to remove. So row to remove. It's actually going to be like wherever you had a selected entity key, you're also going to have a row to remove. So I've got one like right there. I just happen to be in my add quote area at that time. I've got to define the variable down here. So my row to remove is right there. And then at the moment where I know the row to remove, I'm going to have to set it, right? This is actually why I made two variables. So I made two variables because I knew that my MovieQuote row I was going to have to remove later. So I cheated a little bit. I've done this app once before. All right, so let's test it, but we should have just implemented edit. So refresh your page, make sure you've got a nice clean build here. So I'm going to edit MMM, and I'm going to add a QQQ, and I'm going to say update quote, and it didn't work. I kind of thought it was going to work, but it did not work. Did something wrong. All right, I know what I did wrong. I didn't ever actually use the row to remove, so that was just a goof. So you can see that here I set it, but I never actually used it anywhere. Easy fix. So here's where I inserted the quote after the template. The next thing I want to do is I want to say row to remove dot remove. This one we should protect though. We should say, so if row to remove exists, then call row to remove dot remove. Easy peasy. And the reason we want to protect it is because it might be null, and we don't want to call a function on null because that would actually cause a JavaScript crash, right? So a little protection there, and some prevention. Let's go see if we actually fixed it. Refresh it, make sure I got a clean slate. So it says QQQ at this moment. I don't really care about that. I'll change it back to just a single Q and a single M. I'll say update quote. Presto changeo worked right in place there, right? You could also edit one from below. So this is my movie 2. And if you notice, like if you keep your eye right there, as soon as I hit update quote, it went out from wherever it was at, and it got added to the top. And that's how it's supposed to work. So we've done it. We finally implemented edit. So we're going to cut this video off here because edit took a little while. And we'll come back next time for delete. See you then. Bye.